So with that, I would like to invite our next presenter of the IFC representative. Is it Nomsa or Benjamin? Please take it away.
I just wanted to obviously note that because of timing, if I speed through this, please feel free, I think anybody in the audience, to follow up with me directly. And I'd like to also obviously thank, I think FSD and ABBE for organizing this event. I think just very quickly, I think as introduced, so I work for the IFC, which is the private sector arm of the World Bank Group. There are 5 arms of the World Bank Group, and obviously the IFC is one of them, but we also have IBRD, MIGA, the World Bank itself, which is directly involved with government entities, as well as the IMF. IFC, so obviously I sit within the IFC, and we specifically focus on just the private sector, and we have a very large ESG team. So I think I'm joined by my colleague who I think might be on the line, Ben, and we also have a much wider team of, I think, a couple of hundred ESG specialists at the IFC, which I think also speaks to the point that has been made by various speakers today around the emerging importance of ESG. And that also means recognizing the intentionality and commitment to ESG. So it not just being a phrase or something that is a trend, but rather also putting budget and resources behind that. And I do believe that the IFC is doing that. I think by background, if I can just comment, obviously useful for the audience. So I joined the IFC in February of this year of 2023. I come from a consulting and private equity background, largely working across both developed and emerging markets. And so I think it's fair to say have had quite an interesting career. I've worked in the ESG field for 15 years and had quite an interesting career looking at how ESG has really evolved. I think the IFC has been one of the institutions, and that's one of the reasons I wanted to join them, that has really been at the forefront of pushing ESG standards, particularly in emerging markets. So I just want to quickly talk about the program that we launched in Ethiopia. I think Hikmet had mentioned this at the beginning of the session. And we are, I think for everybody in the room, it's important obviously to share this information because one of our objectives is to make sure that we have consistent information being shared across all markets. So the IFC launched what's called the IESG program, the Integrated ESG Program, this year across 6 countries in Africa, one of which is Ethiopia. And really it was to address or look at the top ESG challenges across sub-Saharan Africa, which you can see some of those key challenges articulated in the top left-hand side of the slide. And then it really was to work across various sectors with a priority on the banking sector, pension funds, manufacturing, agricultural, and affordable housing sectors. So we have a team of dedicated specialists that are working on this, both in-house from the IFC as well as external experts. And it's really to work across 3 levels. And this program actually was designed to address questions and capacity demands that I think the IFC has seen across its working history. So working maybe actually from the top down, the first level that this integrated ESG program is working on is the regulatory level. So supporting regulators and industry associations to implement or to further integrate ESG standards into the relevant country codes and regulations. The second part of this program is market level. So that's looking at building the capacity of local market intermediaries to then support clients, whether it's banks or companies, in implementing best practice in ESG. So This, for example, involves across the 6 countries that we are implementing this on the African continent, involves working with selecting, for example, a cohort of consultants who will be trained and receive certification on what best practice of ESG looks like, and therefore can better service their local markets. And then the third component of the program is the firm level or the company level. And this is working directly with companies and financial institutions that are either existing investments by the IFC, or they are potential future investments of the IFC, to specifically look at what are their specific needs around ESG, whether that's from fundraising and investment perspective, or whether it's from developing environmental, social, and corporate governance management systems. So these 3 levels are across all of the countries that we're doing this, across the 6 countries, and obviously Ethiopia is one of those countries and a key country that we're doing this in. I won't spend too much time on the following slide because I think this already speaks to what I presented on the previous slide in terms of how we're looking at the Integrated ESG Program and the 3 components, which you can see in the purple text, of how we're targeting regulatory, market, and firm or company level objectives. So I mentioned that obviously there are key sectors for the IFC. This is based on IFC's strategy and areas of strategic priority. The first key sector is the banking sector. IFC has a long track record of collaborating and investing in banks across the continent. And that is something that we're actively looking at in Ethiopia as well. And so this is really important in terms of understanding where the banking sector is in Ethiopia at the moment with regards to ESG and sustainability, and how the IFC can work together with existing clients as well as new clients on adopting good practice or best practice when it comes to ESG in the banking sector. The same obviously applies for the manufacturing and agribusiness sectors. So these are the other 2 sectors that we are working on in Ethiopia. I will share a bit further in the subsequent slides on what exactly we're doing in the manufacturing and agribusiness sector, and I'll also share what we're doing in the banking sector in Ethiopia. So the first point, which I think Hikmat, as well as a couple of other presenters, raised, is that we have partnered with ABE to develop an environment, social, and corporate governance code, so an ESG code for Ethiopia. We view this as a key instrument in obviously moving the sustainability agenda forward and elevating it in Ethiopia. I think Hikmat noted at the beginning that this will be an overarching instrument that really will outline requirements for how companies as well as financial institutions can effectively manage ESG risks, as well as how do you leverage ESG opportunities. The code, so we call it the ESG Code, will be applicable nationwide. It will apply to all sectors, and it's proposed to be mandatory. And obviously, given ABE's position from a regulatory perspective, it's a really important partnership for us to be able to develop this code, and obviously the role that ABE will play in monitoring and evaluating the implementation of that code once it has been developed. So that is really the first stage of what we are doing in Ethiopia, and that targets the regulatory level. And then we are also working on ESG guidelines. So these ESG guidelines will be informed by the ESG code, but they will be sector specific. So they will mirror the code, but then obviously be tailored to the 3 specific sectors that I mentioned. The first of which is the banking sector, and the second and third sectors are the agribusiness and manufacturing sectors. So obviously, I think, again, IFC has a strong presence in Ethiopia. We have a country office there, but it's very important to partner with local associations, industries, and regulators, and because that is fundamental to the success of any standards or regulations being implemented. So I mentioned that on the development of the ESG code, we're working with ABE. And so on the development of the sectoral ESG guidelines, we will be working with the Ethiopian Bankers Association, and on the development of the ESG guidelines for the manufacturing and agribusiness sectors, we are working with the Addis Chamber of Commerce. So this is work that has already been kicked off. It is obviously, I'd say, in the initial stages, because we had our first launch for the overarching program in March of this year. So we are a couple of months in. We have established working groups for the development of the ESG code, working with ABBE, and we have also established working groups with the Chamber of Commerce, as well as the Bankers Association for the development of the ESG guidelines. However, I think it's important to note, and I think this is why such events are very important for awareness raising, that not everything is set in stone, because I think stakeholder feedback and input is key to the success and functioning of this program. And so, for example, we're still formulating and discussing the exact constitution of the working groups and how we want to therefore develop and roll out the code as well as the guidelines. So I'm nearing the end of my presentation, but I think it's obviously important to also share names and faces to who is working on this program in Ethiopia. I've obviously introduced myself and my background. I work very closely with a colleague who's called Rose Lumumba, which I think Dawit and Hikmet in particular know quite well, who is a corporate governance specialist. So she, along with Anne, have been very heavily involved in starting to work on the code, obviously in collaboration with ABBE. And then myself, I'm an environmental and social specialist, so I am largely focusing on the E&S aspects, whereas Rose and Anne are focusing on the G, or the corporate governance aspects, so we work together as an integrated team. And I'm also joined, I think she should be in the room, by my counterpart, Sion, who is working as our in-country coordinator on this integrated ESG program. Obviously, it goes without saying that it's not just the IFC team that are members of this program. As I mentioned, we have signed partnership agreements with the three institutions that are up on the slide. One aspect I think that is very much a work in progress is how we also engage the regulators further, and I'm very happy to see the Central Bank or National Bank of Ethiopia present today, because I think this is some of the feedback that we've received, particularly for the work that we are doing in the banking sector, as well as engagement on, I think, the environmental and social side, in particular, for example, the Environmental Protection Authority, the EPA, on how we develop guidelines and make sure that all stakeholders are included in this process. So I wanted to lastly share just some key dates, because I think, again, this is important so that everybody is on the same page of the approximate timeline that we're working to. I think it's obviously important to bear in mind that things always shift. Sometimes we deliver early, sometimes we deliver a bit late. But as I mentioned, we launched the program in March of this year, and we worked to establish working groups to really sort of get this going and make sure that we're getting the right stakeholders involved across May and June. So we now have those working groups established. And now really it's beginning to look at how we draft both the ESG code as well as the guidelines. So that is something that we will be doing with the working groups in terms of reviewing the table of contents for these important documents, and then holding regular workshops as well as sessions with the working group members to review and provide feedback on the development of the code as well as the two ESG guidelines. The aim is for both the ESG code and the two ESG guidelines to be ready for launch by hopefully March of next year, so 2024. We're currently in discussions in terms of a timeline of how we, I think from my side, I'm the team lead for this overall program in Ethiopia. And I've worked a lot in Ethiopia, and I think one thing that I have learned and is quite important is also allowing for a public consultation and public comment on these documents. So that is something that we also are integrating into this overall timetable to ensure that everybody has had equal opportunity to review and comment on the code as well as the guidelines, not just obviously the working groups.